So
Yeah.
I always start like high level, kind of getting done, and I like diving back into like what a mortgage is and how it works and what the different types and things to look out for. So there's so many ways that we can take this conversation.
Yeah.
But there's a lot that I kind of want to dig into because I've been thinking about this for weeks and weeks and weeks on end. And I think a mortgage is one of the most important things that people go out for. And there's so many sides to that. And I always say, if you look at it from two degrees, right, differently, it changes your perspective so much,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Because I can tell you, most people, and me and you've had this conversation. Well, I'm just going to pay it off, Brendan. I'm going, yeah, you could just pay it off, right? I'm just paying it. You're in the industry, you can just pay it off, right? But we've also come back and said, hey, carrying debt sometimes is not a bad thing as long as you do it the right way. But let's talk about the right and the wrong way a little bit for 2 seconds and see what that looks like for you. So how do people go through a mortgage from just basics, and we get on common ground here?
Well, now most everything is electronic. And I would say 80 to 90% of the deals I do, I don't ever meet the person face to face until I go to their closing.
I know it's changed a lot.
Yeah.
Hasn't it?
So the process is you have to do an online application. And what happens in my world is I'll get a referral and I'll call that person right away and have a little short conversation with them, answer any upfront questions they might have, and point them to the online application. They fill it out. I have a team that if it's early in the day, by mid-afternoon, they've got it all worked up for me so that I can talk to the people again and say you're pre-approved or we need to jump these few hurdles. If it's at night, next morning, we get a pre-approval. Pre-approval means that from the front end, before all of the other nuances and documentation and all that is in, from the front end, you can qualify according to the high-level rules, mortgage rules. And so you get a pre-approval, and then you and your realtor can go make an offer on a house with that pre-approval. At our place, we go a little bit further at that front end, and we ask for that upfront documentation because I don't want to give a pre-approval that I can't stand behind, right?
Right. You give it kind of a little bit extra to make sure everything's there.
So then you put an offer on a house, and then there is copious amounts of paperwork that have to happen to get that mortgage all the way through to the end. Appraisal has to be ordered, title work for the long-term history of the title of the property. You put in the application what your income is, what your job history is, what your residence history is. We have to verify all that behind the scenes by sending forms out to employers. And, of course, we pulled your credit already at the beginning. We can talk about that, too. People get worried about pulling their credit.
Yeah, if it's a hard pull or a soft pull.
Yeah,
or
exactly. And we get the appraisal after, it takes 2 weeks maybe right now to get an appraisal. And then all of that is compiled. And if I've done my job right, when my team puts it in front of what we call an underwriter, the underwriter is going to look at everything in that package or that file and test it against the rules that of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac for a conventional loan or FHA for an FHA loan. And they're going to come back and say, you did a good job. I think I might need one more document from you. And we go back and get it. And then the next thing that happens is you get a final disclosure of the numbers that you're going to go to. You got an initial one in the beginning showing you all the fees, all the costs, all the down payment, all that. That initial one is then updated at the end because things change during the process. You know? I mean, we might say at the beginning that we're estimating your house appraisal is going to be $700, and if the appraiser only charges us $600, we're going to put the new number.
You're going to reflect whatever the changes are.
So then you get that final number 3 days before your closing date, which is a federal law, and then you go to the title company and you sign 60 docs or so to.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
All right, so let's unpack that a little bit because there's a lot there, and there's a lot to go inside of that, right? So the main things is like I want to look at is that process of what expectations are compared to what reality is, because I think expectations on a loan is way different than what reality is. And so I think it's extremely easy if you're a W-2 employee to get a house loan. If you're a business owner, which is mostly my clients, it gets extremely difficult in most cases or some cases, because proving up employment is really difficult. So I want to, I'm not a CPA, I got to say that, but let's unpack some tax things here for a second, right?
Well, yeah.
So the biggest questions I always come to is, like, most CPAs will take for a business owner will use depreciation across the board, right? Will show extremely low W-2 wages because they're a Schedule S on side of their LLC, and they want wages low because they want to skip self-employment taxes. And so it makes it all come to passive incomes through the K-1 as draws and dividends and things like that, depending on the entity structure. So I always say getting into that box early on with guys, it's got to be a lot easier than it is after the fact, because and what's the rules is if you're not in business for 2 years.
Yeah, right. So that's changed a little bit, because all of the data that we collect, whether it's a self-employed person or a W-2 employee, all the data we collect is uploaded to an automated underwriting system, which is Fannie Mae is the big mortgage guru in Washington, and they have this software engine that tests every single piece of data that we put into a mortgage application to see if it fits the rules or not. So when it comes to that self-employed,
so what's the basic rules?
The basic rules are your usable income. I'm sorry, back that up. Your monthly debt load, not balances, but payments.
So it's called debt service coverage ratio in my world, but you usually call it debt to income ratio.
Yeah, well, yeah, right. Well,
so it's the payments that you're making on your debt equal to how much salary or monthly income that you're bringing in.
Right. So the payments you have on all your debt plus the new house payment.
Oh, you add that into it on top of it.
Right. And that can't exceed 50% of your gross monthly income if you're W-2, or your bottom line with a self-employed person. So a lot to unpack is right, because on a self-employed guy, that bottom line at the bottom of his tax return, AGI,
could be negative.
Could be negative. It could be just really small. Any depreciation, equipment depreciation, vehicle depreciation,
179 deduction, whatever you're looking at.
Not necessarily 179.
Really? Y'all don't even account for 179 accelerated depreciation?
Please don't say y'all. It's the rules from Washington.
Good point, Tom. Yeah. Sorry. But you're right. So the rules will say that you have to have a debt service coverage ratio, including your mortgage payment, to be 50% in excess of what the debt is. So if my mortgage is $1,000 a month, I got to be making at least clearing $2,000 a month.
Right. Well, mortgage plus your other monthly payments. So if I have a car and a credit card and a house, my new house and student loan, all those payments added together, they're $2,500, which is facetious, but $2,500.
Correct.
I got to be making at least $5,000 a month to qualify.
Do y'all take into account passive income streams then?
If they're on the tax return.
Yeah. So if you have multiple entities, like just take me for example, right? We have multiple real estate entities.
Yep.
And so this entity, we might have a conventional mortgage, real estate mortgage on it, because it's a commercial property. And, we call it debt service coverage ratio, and it's generating $120,000 in gross revenue, but $80,000 of it's going to a mortgage on it. We're cash flowing $40,000 at the end of the year, right?
Yeah, as long as that $40,000 shows up on a tax return, I can.
And
count
it carries through, and as it carries through as passive income inside of there.
Yep.
Okay, so that's the biggest, and that's why I wanted to get to that. That's the biggest question I probably have. Is there everybody saying, hey, there's all these different entities. There's Schedule E, right? There's 1040. Right, and you got farmers. I just dredge them when I'm going.
Yeah,
I love these guys together, but that Schedule F is detrimental sometimes.
Right, but most farmers have a huge depreciation for equipment that we can add back to their bottom line. Depreciation on equipment or vehicles, I don't care if it's $250,000. I can count that as income.
Good.
So if their bottom line on the farm is a negative $100,000 and they got $250 in depreciation, they now have $150,000 of income I can count toward their debt service coverage ratio.
Yeah, that's crazy. And most people don't call it debt service coverage ratio. That's more on the CFA side. It's debt to income ratio.
Debt to income,
Yeah.
Which is easy if you think about it. Debt payments as a percentage of your gross income.
It's got to exceed 50%.
Be less than 50%.
Or be less than 50%. Yeah.
Yep.
So I think.